high school. Railroad tracks are exactly a quarter mile away. Oh, green.
What's up, guys? It's Gary. Happy Thanksgiving. And now is the perfect time to, again, say thank you to everyone who watches. Thank you to everyone who subscribed. All you guys from the beginning who've been commenting down below, forgive me, but my memory doesn't remember your name off the top of my head, but you all know who you are. So thank you guys again. And I just wanted to kind of talk to you guys this time, do a little bit of a talking head video, as they call it, and kind of discuss generally, you know, car guy stuff. My obsession with cars, where that started, and kind of what I call the Fast and the Furious era, which this is going to reveal my age, which I never thought I'd get to the point where my age is something I didn't necessarily want people to know, but it's going to be relevant to the stories and stuff like that, so we'll get into that. But I figured before we go and have a talk, let's fire up the old Camaro here. This was my dad's car. He bought in 1985. Been in the family all that time, and, well, long story short, let's just fire it up and listen to it run for a minute. It's been sitting since probably about July. Threw a battery in it, put some gas in it, and let's crank it up. I don't know if you guys can see that fuel filter, but it's not pulling fuel yet. You know, normally if it sat this long, I would pour some gas down the carburetors, but I think we're just going to keep giving her the old college try. I think she'll go. I'm actually surprised it didn't have fuel still in the bowls. Maybe they leaked down a little bit. I don't know why I'm pumping the throttle. There ain't no fuel in there. Okay. Let's go have a look, shall we? Yeah, she's dry as a bone. Oh wait, there's something happening right there. Then again, that might just be nothing. Well, I really don't like putting fuel down the carburetors just because it's a pain, and I have like a phobia of starting engines, carbureted engines, with the air cleaner off for backfire's sake. So I'll go ahead and I'll put fuel down there, and then I'll have to put the air cleaners back on. It's too much of a pain. She'll pull fuel. All right, well, that was fun. Yeah, every time I start that thing up, I get that motivation back. You know, then I think about, oh man, next summer. It was last summer that I thought it was going to be this summer, but, you know, we'll get there. But anyway, you know, Uncle Tony's garage, he calls this the boomer chair. So I think we're going to call this the millennial chair. And I'm not going to go too far back because there's actually another video on the channel that has like no views whatsoever. If you guys really want to go all the way back to like, you know, my young years as a go-kart person and my father and all that stuff, you can go back and find that video. But let's start around driving age, but a little bit before, so 14 years old. And I'll call this, I've never really referred to it as this before, but we're going to refer to it now. It's the Fast and the Furious era. So, you know, ever since I was a kid, not like I said, I wasn't going to go back too far, but most car people, I think, are really like from basically before they can remember kind of an age into cars. They don't necessarily know the specifics, but usually it's family related. You know, your father or somebody is into cars. That Camaro is the evidence of that. But come up to about 14 years old, all I knew before that was hot rods and muscle cars. Seen Hot Rod magazine. My dad would get Hot Rod magazine, Super Chevy magazine, Classic Truck magazine, because he had a 72 Chevy, which, by the way, I'll get to. That was actually my first vehicle that I drove to high school. And, you know, thinking back on it, I actually don't really remember, like, having an idea of what kind of car I might want when I turned 16. And we didn't have money. Like, it wasn't like my father or my family was going to buy me a car. It was, you know, back then, though, you could find really cheap cars, you know, and it wasn't Marketplace or Craigslist. It was, for the most part, you would just drive on back roads around around the neighborhood or anywhere. You just go for a drive looking for cars. That was actually a thing we did back then. You know, we just go for a drive, look for cars for sale. Old cars usually, like muscle cars and stuff like that were on the side of the road. And I don't really remember having a specific desire for a particular type of car. So about the time I was 14, two things happened. The most important thing was I got my first car. And it was actually free, given to my dad. It wasn't actually given to my dad for me or anything like that. It was, I'll basically give you the quick backstory. I was in Little League baseball ever since I was very young, like from the T-ball era, T-ball age, all the way up until about 8th grade, right around 8th grade, 9th grade, which would have been 13, 14 years old, right? Basically, this car was given to my dad because I was at a Little League game, and this guy was my dad's friend from before I was born. They reconnect, and he goes, hey, I got this car on my property I'm getting rid of. Do you want it? Had a clean title and everything. 1987 Volkswagen Jetta. Wasn't a GLI. It wasn't a diesel. Two things that I didn't even know existed as far as the Jettas go at the time. So anyway, Volkswagen Jetta, kind of a gunmetal gray, 5-speed, of course. 5-speed, just a GL, so it had the 1.8 8-valve engine. Really was actually a pretty clean car. The paint was good other than the hood, the roof, and the trunk, which is a lot of cars from that era, too. You know, it's basically the sun kills the hood, the roof, and the trunk, but the sides were like a nice gunmetal gray, and good running, good driving car. Totally stock. So my dad gets this car, they drop it off here, and suddenly I'm in love with this thing. Like, I don't know why. It was just a new type of car. Like I said, previously my whole life was based around hot rods and muscle cars. And going back again to when I was really young, my dad we would go to like car shows sometimes, you know, when I was pretty young. The local car show was out in Middletown, New York here. And some people might be familiar with Middletown, New York for Orange County Speedway, the dirt track dirt racetrack, which they have like the Eastern States, the big race every year. And yeah, so hot rods and muscle cars. This '87 Volkswagen Jetta pops in the driveway, and suddenly this is my car, and it's I in my mind it's my car. I'm like, I have to own this car. This has to be my first car. And I don't remember the exact details, but I expressed that to my parents, maybe just my father, I don't know. I expressed that I really wanted that car, and it was 14 years old, so 2 years later I would be driving. And another thing happened around that exact same time. The Fast and the Furious. So I'm 14 years old when the first Fast and the Furious comes out. You can do the math on that if you want to figure out how old I actually am. But the first Fast and the Furious comes out. I'm 14. Me and my friends go to see it. And I think at the time, my best friend that went to see it with, I think he was into like import cars. But I just remember seeing the trailer. The trailer popped up on TV. And man, it was like, you got chills when you saw that trailer. I don't really remember what kind of exposure or knowledge. I can't remember now. I can't remember what exposure and knowledge I had of like the import car scene. But a lot of things were happening at that time that were making the import cars very popular. Like there was even an MTV episode of, what's that show? MTV Real Life or True Life? I think it was. True Life on MTV. And it was street racers in California. They did a whole entire episode about these street racers, and I actually VHS taped it off the TV and everything. And yeah, I was kind of like, I had like a revelation at that point. I was suddenly a young, new generation car guy into import cars. In particular, I was really into European cars because I got the Jetta, and suddenly I did a deep dive, and I was into Jettas and Golfs, and basically Volkswagens. Got Eurotuner magazine subscription, and then me and my dad went to Waterfest? Yep, Waterfest. Again, this is all before even having a license. I didn't drive, obviously. Before I even had a license, I was already like deep diving into what I could do to this car, modifying it. I put like subs in the trunk. I had neon underglow, and I'm talking the legit original neon street glow kit, name brand. In fact, I still have the receipt. I found it recently. I still have the receipt. It was on sale, I think it was on sale for maybe $199 or $149, but it was like retail like over $300. Green, of course. Why green? Well, the Fast and the Furious. The first scene in the Fast and the Furious, those black Civics go by, and they got the green underglow, and you're sitting in the theater, and the truck scene happens. We got the real money load, and it's coming your way. Look for Rogers on the side of the truck, and don't forget my share of the deal. Truck drives away. Truck. Those Civics fly by, the whole theater shakes from the sound, and the neon underglow lights are amazing. And I think maybe right then and there, I thought that was awesome, the neon. So then, of course, the Eclipse. The Eclipse, I wasn't really that into that era Eclipse, but it had the green neon. And I don't know, I gravitated towards the green. I wanted the green underglow. So I had the street glow kit on there, pretty loud exhaust, and just it was still like stock wheels, but I lowered it. I got like J.C. Whitney super cheap coilovers. So J.C. Whitney for some, I don't know how old all of my audience is, but I know I got some real young people and I got some people older than me and all in between. So J.C. Whitney was a catalog, kind of like Summit Racing and Jegs, but it was a lot more very regular stuff in that catalog for a lot of different vehicles. And there was this kind of more or less universal, but it was listed to fit a Volkswagen Jetta. It was like a kind of universal coilover kit. Real kind of silly stuff, actually. You used the original strut, and you just took the spring out of the strut and you put the coilover. It was like a smaller spring with the coilover sleeve onto the stock strut. And I think I did replace the struts with new ones, but they weren't performance or anything. And it rode like crap. It was stiff as hell, but it was low and it looked cool. And So I get that car all modded up and ready, and I have pictures. I don't have them anymore because a lot of things happened over the years where I've lost things have been damaged and everything else. But I used to take pictures of everything with like a disposable camera, and I would be showing my friends in high school, oh, I got this car, and wait till I get it out. Funny thing is, I never actually got that car to high school. By the time, I didn't actually totally finish high school officially. I think I got to 12th grade, and on like the first week, I ended up going and getting my GED. No shame in that. But anyway, I never even got to drive the car to high school. My first vehicle, but I did drive it, but we'll get to that. So my first vehicle I actually drove to high school. So at 16, I had my license right away. And I was driving my dad's 72 Chevy C30, 4-speed, 292 straight six. So it had a granny gear 4-speed, 292 straight six, and 456 rear gears, and it would scream at like 50 miles an hour. And that was my daily driver. I drove that right from the get-go, 16 years old. My first day to school, I actually remember what song was on the radio. It still had the original radio with the knobs and everything. And it was Tom Petty, Running Down a Dream. That was playing on the radio on the way into town. School's 5 miles from my house. So, that was great. That truck was awesome. I mean, having that as a first vehicle, that was arguably way cooler than my Jetta. Now, at the high school, there was actually another Mark II Jetta that was really sweet. It was, like, really nice and done up. Wheels, red, like, kind of like a candy red paint. It was really nice. It was, like, my inspiration, too, as I had my Jetta. But, again, I never got that thing to high school. So, fast forward a very short amount of time, and have the Jetta, finally get it on the road. I'm still probably only, at this point, I'm like maybe 17, maybe 18. I was 17, because it was right, I got it on the road right when I was like finishing getting my GED and stuff. So get the Jetta on the road, I'm driving that. Oh, first night out with the Jetta, it was nighttime, first time I ever drove it. Got it on the road, I'm driving it into into town here, and I get pulled over for the neon underglow. Right off the bat, first drive ever, state trooper pulls me over because you're not allowed to have neon underglow on a car. I had the neon license plate frame, the underglow, the 2 little neon windshield washers. Remember those? And, it was all kitted out. And got pulled over. I don't think I got any tickets. Everything else was legit, So anyway, I'm kind of trying to remember everything and go through my thoughts here. So that car, I loved it. It was a manual transmission, but one day my friend wasn't even really that good of a friend. He was like kind of a friend of a friend, or like one of those people that you kind of know from high school but you don't really hang out with. And he pulls into the car wash in an 88 BMW 528e, which is an E28 body style. They're very sought after now as far as like the M5 goes, but even the regular like 535s and stuff are they're coming up in value a little bit. But back then he was asking $800 for it. It was in okay shape. By today's standards, like right now, the condition it was in then, it would be actually pretty good condition. But it was a kind of rough for the time. 88, and it was in about 2005. 2005 was the year, so the car was an 88. It wasn't super old, but automatic, and it was a 528e, which is the lowest power model. It was actually E for economy, but anyway, I loved the car. I fell in love with the styling, and it was a BMW, and pretty much I immediately sold my Jetta for $1,000, bought that BMW for $800, and I don't think I knew anything about negotiating, because I think he said he wanted $800, and I paid him $800, but never been really good at negotiating car buys or sales. So I get the BMW, and I'm going to be consulting notes here. I have most of the stuff in my head. Obviously, my head is where the notes came from, but I certainly do have some notes here, and actually I just realized I don't even have the correct notes opened up. Actually, I kind of do. I have 2 different notes here. So I'm just going to go off memory. So I get the BMW. Don't do anything to it. It's just driving. It's just good. It's cool. I actually had it where I could pull the muffler off. I had the muffler right at the rear. Pull that off if I wanted to, just to drive it and hear it, and then it would bolt right back on. And, so that didn't last long either, because right after that, I found another turning point in my car life, which is my first Fox body Mustang. 1993, and actually I do have a picture I can throw in of that right here. It didn't have those wheels on it when I got it, but I put those wheels on right after getting it. So 93, original 5.0, 5-speed. And what a life change. That was like another life-altering experience. Just hearing the engine fire up was life-altering. Like, I got there to buy it and everything like that. And by the way, $1,400. Pretty clean, but it had some rust. It had like some bad rust on the hatch that you could see in this picture, and then it also had rust on the fender. I would later come to find out it was rusting quite badly underneath, but it didn't really make that clear until a few years later. But anyway, fired that thing up the day I bought it at the guy's house. Had Flowmasters out the back, a proper 2-chamber Flowmaster kit, and man, the sound it made, no cats. And I was like immediately hooked on that. You know, now I was a Mustang guy. Now I was a muscle car guy. And had the big tires in the back, skinnies on the front. It was slow. It was stock. Had 273 gears. But, you know, it would do burnouts. It would do amazing burnouts. And actually, I was the fastest car of any of my friends. So I think I had at the time, trying to think, you know, it went on for a few years. I had that car for quite a few years. So over the time I had it, you know, I had one friend with a Celica Supra, like an 84 or 85 Celica Supra. That wasn't that fast. Another friend at one point had a Mercor XR4 Ti, and I think he might have been the closest out of, or well, actually no, he wasn't the closest. I think my friend with Audi TT might have been. So it was kind of the cars we all had. Audi TT, one of my friends, Mercor XR4 Ti. Another friend had a Saturn SC2 that he would later make actually pretty impressively fast with only kind of minor like tweaks to it. And that was like the new thing for me. It was the Mustang. I had that for a few years. And then I found I kind of got back into the European cars because I found a Saab 900 SPG. And now I'm kind of feeling like I'm missing something here, because really I started by saying this was the Fast and the Furious era, and I totally lost track and started talking about all my cars. So I'm going to quickly run down on all the cars I had, and then we're going to talk about the thing I actually wanted to talk about, the whole Fast and the Furious era thing. So, Saab 900 SPG. It was awesome. Look it up. Got rid of that because it was rusted out. Got another Fox body because the first Fox body rusted out. Took the whole V8 drivetrain and everything. It was a 4-cylinder. Swapped it into the 4-cylinder. Notchback instead of a hatchback. And I'll throw in a quick video of that car right here. So anyway, I'm kind of getting off in the weeds, and I was going to discuss all of the cars I've had over the years, but before I go any further, let's focus on that Fast and the Furious era thing. So I wanted to talk about the car scene during the Fast and the Furious days. And it was so different because there was no cell phone, like there was no social media, no YouTube. I mean, yeah, there wasn't a YouTube kind of thing back then. Earliest thing was like streetfire.com, which might have been around that era. But, you know, it was a totally different thing. And today you see Cars and Coffee, and you still have nighttime meets, but the nighttime meets, for one thing, they're just not my people. They're totally different people, totally different types of cars. And you got this takeover thing going on. And I don't need to even tell you what that is. I think you've seen that before. So that kind of stuff just did not happen back then. The worst thing that would happen at a car meet, late night car meet, is somebody would maybe do donuts. Like, just one car would go do donuts and everybody's like, yeah, woo, and then they would be done. Or like maybe a cop would have saw them and bust them, and that would be that. But I wanted to actually talk about the difference between like the old school car meets then versus what is now turned into like Cars and Coffee. And the main thing is like the etiquette that was involved in leaving the car show. Everybody there expected and wanted you to rip leaving. Do at least like a pull. You didn't have to do a burnout, nothing crazy. You didn't have to get it sideways and crash. But like at the very least, you wanted to pull out and go through a couple gears. And that was expected. Now you see these people online that are my generation, and they're like, don't leave the Cars and Coffee like that. Now, Cars and Coffee is different. I get that. Sunday morning car meets is a whole different thing. But, I mean, pulling out and doing a couple gear pull, that should not be frowned upon. But that was just the norm back then. The cops didn't really show up. They would every once in a while, but for the most part, you know, you could go a full season with only a few, like, major shutdowns of the car meet, and then it'd be back the next week, or you'd be back to a different spot. There was a couple different main spots. And I'm talking hundreds, maybe not hundreds, but at least 100 cars sometimes would be out there. A lot of cars, a big parking lot. And that was it. Everybody had their spot. You know, everybody kind of pulled in. We had a crew, usually like 3, 4, 5 cars would pull in all at once, and we had our spot. We would all park. And, you know, nothing had LS swaps or K swaps back then. Everything had an actual, like, cool engine that had character. The cars had character. I mean, yes, there was the most, like, kind of basic what cars that would be considered then less characterful would have probably been, like, the Hondas, which now, those particular Hondas from that era are sought after and cool and have character. But back then, that was kind of like the more low-key, boring cars. But there wasn't any kind of stuff like you have now. Like, you didn't really have new cars. I mean, I just don't think there was many new cars there. It was very rare. 10-year-old, 5-year-old at the most cars would be there. And then older, you know, much older than that. And, you know, the other thing was it was kind of a generational, it was kind of like a generational meld of the old guy, muscle car era guy, and the younger import car, Nopey Tuner Vision, Fast and the Furious guys were kind of in the same parking lot in some cases, you know, the same meet. And the show we would go to, now, nowadays, you call it a car meet. Back then, my friends and I just all called it the car show. And it kind of was rooted in the fact that there was a car show, like an actual sanctioned car show, with oldies music and a tent. And old guys, not to, you know, I don't know if old guys is an offensive term, but, you know, they were old guys back then. That's what we figured they were, right? So, hell, some of them were probably my age. But anyway, you know, all right, I'm cutting all that out. So, you know, you had the actual sanctioned car show in part of that parking lot with the oldies music and the tent. And then those guys at around 8 o'clock would all pack it in and go away. At the exact same time, between like 8, 9, and 10 o'clock, the outlaw car show would start, and everybody would pack into the lot in their import tuner cars and their Fox bodies and their IROCs and stuff like that. And yeah, it was just a totally different thing back then. It really was awesome. Hey, quick editor's note for something I missed when I was talking about that. I really wanted to mention the cruising aspect too. So in the town where the car meet was, there was a main road, 211, which was a long, straight, multi-lane divided with a median. And, you know, part of the experience was going out on that road and just cruising up and down, getting into little light-to-light drag races, you know, nothing crazy, but that was, like, really a big part of the experience. And especially just, you know, on your way out there, getting to the car show, all the cars that would be on the road on that main drag right in front of where the car meet was. And then, of course, you know, people would leave the car meet, lay into it in the little straightaway in the parking lot. But then, like, later on, when everybody was really starting to leave the car meet, you'd go out and you'd look at the main road, or you'd at least hear it, depending on where it was, because there was also a spot, sometimes we'd be at the McDonald's, which was, like, right on the road, whereas the normal car meet was kind of, like, pushed up off the road a bit, and you couldn't really see. But, yeah, it was just such a great experience back then. I don't really think there's anything like that these days. And then you had the street racing going on as well. There was kind of 2 levels of street racing back then. There might be still today, but I don't know. I haven't been out to anything like that in probably over a decade. And, you know, you had two levels of street racers. You had, like, actual, serious, legit street racers that would show up there, and they would kind of keep it low-key, and they would go out and they'd do their runs. And everybody would try to follow and get a view of it, right? But then you also had just street racing for fun, which I had participated in quite a few times. I never wanted to put money down on a street race because I knew I would lose most of the time in a basically stock Fox body. But, yeah, you had a lot of just real low-key, slower cars doing street racing for fun, and nobody really getting busted. It was just kind of pretty simple stuff. And also, so the fast cars back then in my area were like DSMs, like Eagle Talon, Mitsubishi Eclipse first gens, and Evos, like the Evo 8. So that was probably, you know what, the newest, now that I think about it, the newest cars there would have been like STIs and Evos. Those were like pretty popular. Somehow young people were able to afford those, probably get loans on them and stuff. But there was some highly modified ones too that were fast and street raced. But there was also, of course, Fox bodies. You know, you had a couple old muscle cars and stuff like that. But again, you know, that was within about 5 years. Basically between 5 to 10 years of like the Fast and the Furious coming out in 2001 was really the golden era, as far as I'm concerned, of the quote-unquote car meet. And, you know, it was really amazing. Like, back then, I lived for that. That was all I cared about all week was Friday night. Go to the car wash my car, meet up with all my friends at the car wash, and then we would all roll out to the car meet, to the car show. And every week, that was it. That was like literally all I cared about, you know? And wanted to mod my car more and didn't really have any money to do it. I did little things here and there. I ended up doing, like, on that Mustang, I did 373 gears and an intake manifold. But, you know, really just that's all I ever did to it. The Mustang that I'm referring to right now from back then when I would street race was the first Mustang, the one I showed you before, the black one. This car here, the red one, was the 4-cylinder that I swapped everything into, and later on I actually did basically a full mechanical restoration on this from the ground up to make it more of a mountain ripper, like, sort of a cross between a drift car and just a road race car for the street. But maybe I'll do a video about that in the future. And so basically over the years, I've had so many different cars. A few duds, a few cars that weren't really anything. They were just kind of my daily driver. But I actually made a list of all the cars I've had, not including my truck and another truck that I had. I had 11 cars. Since my first car, I've had 11 cars, and that also doesn't include the C30, which was technically my dad's. And, you know, going over the list again, I forgot one car that never actually saw the road that I got as a project for me and my dad to work on, which is a 55 DeSoto Fireflight that had the 291 Hemi. So I included that in the 11 cars because it fired up, it drove in the driveway. I never actually got it on the road, but had the Volkswagen Jetta 87, DeSoto Fireflight, BMW 528e, 5.0 Mustang, Saab 900 SPG, Ford Mustang 2.3 automatic that I drove until I swapped everything from the 5.0 into it. Then I had a Jeep Grand Cherokee 5.2, which that's when we get into like, I just needed a vehicle to get around while I worked on the Mustang. So Jeep Grand Cherokee 5.2, which again, I didn't just stumble across, I sought it out. I was like, I need a daily, what do I want? My friend had a newer WJ Grand Cherokee, and so I fell in love with it because it was fast, it was a V8, it was pretty quick, and it was just really comfortable and nice inside. So I was like, I want a ZJ, the older version, because you could get them for like nothing. V8, of course. So 5.2 liter Grand Cherokee. Then I had the Mustang going for a couple or few years and still had the Jeep as a daily. And then I got rid of the Mustang, and before getting rid of the Mustang, I got a Miata. I ended up getting a 1990 Miata, all taken apart with the engine out, put it all together, put the engine in it, and drove that for about a year or two until I sold it for a massive profit from what I had into it. That wasn't why I bought it, but ended up selling it way more than I had into it because I got it in pieces. And then I got rid of the Mustang. So anything I had that was cool, which was the Mustang and the Miata, I ended up getting rid of. And then I got the 300D, which if you see the video, not this car, if you see the video when I got this car, the car I traded for it was a 97 Mercedes E300D. Naturally aspirated OM606. Had that for about a year, got bored with it, traded it for this 300TD, which, by the way, is for sale. It's very rough. There's a few videos of it on the channel, but it doesn't quite show how rough it is in those videos. The floor underneath needs floor pans. It's very rusted underneath, and, you know, it's just a kind of a rough condition car. But if anybody is local in the Hudson Valley, you know, New York, Connecticut, even, like, you know, that Northeast, it is for sale. I don't know how long it's going to last. I just listed it yesterday, and I got a couple days ago, and I got a lot of messages on it, so we'll see. But regardless, if you guys are interested, like, seriously, in buying that thing, email me. My email will be in the description. GaryDeo302@gmail.com if you actually have interest in that. I do have a guy kind of potentially buying it on Friday, so I can't make any guarantees. I didn't just get your hopes up on that, but, you know, we'll kind of see where that goes, right? And I had a couple trucks. One I still have. The F8000 is like more or less my dream truck that I never knew was my dream truck. Actually, for many years I wanted a medium duty, so I ended up looking for one specifically for a 3208 Cat. Like, I was like, I don't even care if it's a GMC, a Chevy, or a Ford, because they came with that. You know, GMC, Top Kick, Chevy Brigadier, they came with the 3208. It's basically the heavy, medium heavy version, just like this is. This is an F8000, which is more or less the heaviest version of like an F800. And yeah, 3208 Cat turbo, and there's a story behind that too. So when I was looking for the Ford over there, you know, like I said, I was looking for a 3208. I didn't even care about the truck as much as the engine. And there was a truck I looked at before that on Marketplace listed as having a 3208 Cat. And I had my friend drive me all the way out to, I think it was New Hampshire or Massachusetts, like really far, like 3-hour drive or something like that. Get there, not only is the thing a total jalopy, which frankly probably wouldn't have bothered me so much, didn't even have a 3208 in it. The guy wasn't there when I got there, even though he was supposed to meet me there. It actually had a Brazilian inline 6, which is actually a great engine. And I would love to have another one with the Brazilian inline 6. But at the time, I was like, what the hell? I want a 3208. What the hell? It said it was supposed to have a 30. He said it had a 3208. And it didn't even have a 3208. So then I had this truck saved on Marketplace for probably over a month, if not longer, until finally I ended up messaging the guy and saying, hey, I'll give you, you know, the amount. I paid $2,000 for it. I'll just flat out tell you. I hate when people don't tell you how much they paid for things, by the way. So I paid $2,000 for that truck. I think he was asking $3,800 or $3,900, and I offered him, and he had it for sale for so long. So I was like, $2,000, I could be there tomorrow. My friend drove me out to Long Island, and I drove it home. Like, you know, no Reggie, no. I had insurance, but yeah, that was a little fun. That was sketchy, but it worked out, and definitely that truck is probably on the list of things that I probably won't get rid of. The Camaro is a sentimental attachment thing. I really want to make sure I keep that car if I can. You know, I don't want to get rid of that car at all. Kind of sucks I don't really have a good place to keep it. But the truck too, the truck is something that I really don't see selling, because you're not going to find another one for that amount of money. Like, I don't know, they're not worth that much money, but still, finding that exact spec, you know, everything about it. It has 370 rear gears, so it pulls, like, it's pretty fast for what it is. You know, you can cruise the highway at like 65, 70 and not be totally screaming with the engine. Man, I'm getting in the weeds again. What am I even talking about? So anyway, how long has this video been? Probably way too long. I also made a list, by the way, of all the vehicles that I remember my family having. So we didn't have a lot of money, and I don't know, back in the day, you know, I don't know if a lot of people were like this, but I know I had a friend that his family went through a few different cars, and we just always had different cars, and nothing that was ever, I don't know if we had anything that was less than 10 years old, maybe, at any given time. I remember when my mom got a used 93 Taurus in like the late 90s. That might have been the newest car we had. And it was my grandpa, her father, bought it for her. But yeah, I actually remember the first car I ever rode in as a child was a blue 76 Chevy Nova 4-door. My dad would later tell me it had a 305. I didn't know that when I was a kid. And then my dad had some kind of Subaru as well. I think he got rid of the Nova. He had like a Subaru with a 5-speed, like an 80s. There was a 72 Dodge D100, green 72 D100 automatic, which was my dad got it, and then my mom actually drove it. My mom didn't get her license until she was like 30 years old. So she got that and she ended up driving that, and then one day my dad drove it to work, and he said that the wiring harness in the dash burned up, and that was the end of it. We never saw the truck again. He left it at the junkyard. Because he was working at Campbell Hall Junkyard. Then there was an 88 Oldsmobile Delta 88 in brown. That was my mom's car. I have memories of riding in the back seat of that with my sister and then her friend, and we'd roll into the Galleria Mall, and she, it was a big, giant sedan, and my mom just got her license, and she would turn in to bounce the rear wheel over the curb, and it was the most funny thing. It was the funniest thing to me. I would laugh so hard. And then, 62 Pontiac Catalina 4-door in red. That was my uncle's car, my mom's brother, and he gave it to her. And we had that for a few years, maybe, I don't know how long. Eventually ended up selling that. So we would go to the car show, the old person car show out in Middletown with that sometimes. And it was a 4-door, and back then, that would have been like in the 90s. 4-doors just, even today, 4-doors are not really worth anything, but like they're coming up. 4-doors today, like old muscle car, not muscle car, but any kind of old classic car that's a 4-door, they're finally starting to gain some ground just because they're the only things left. They're the only kind of old cars that are still cheap for the most part. But back then 4-door wasn't really considered much of anything. Then what did we have? So then we got 1980 Toyota Corolla wagon, which is really cool. Rear-wheel drive, kind of the last of the rear-wheel drive. No, not the last. And he had another body style after that. The AE86 would have come. I think the next body style was the AE86. That generation. So it was an 80. The square headlight. I think it's like an AE72 or something like. I don't know my old Toyotas, but it was a rear-wheel drive, 1.8 liter automatic. And it was my dad's and my mom's, kind of like separately. I feel like there was like an era where it was mainly my mom's, and there was an era where it was mainly my dad's, and my dad would do power brake burnouts with it, and one-wheel peel. And then my dad got a 91 Ford Tempo around the same time that my mom had a 93 Taurus. And my mom at one point, I think before the Taurus, my mom had a Chevy Corsica. Very short-lived. She ended up getting a crash because somebody else ran into a red light. She ended up crashing and totaling that car. And again, like every car most of the cars kind of came from like family members and stuff. Like the Corsica was her sister's, my aunt's, gave it to her. Yeah, and then of course the C30, which again, my uncle, which is the same uncle that my Uncle Bob, who was the same uncle, my mom's brother, who gave us the 62 Catalina, gave my dad the 72 Chevy C30. And there was more. My dad then had an 88 VW Fox 2-door wagon, 4-speed manual. And that was after I had the Volkswagen, but he was really into that car. He liked that thing a lot. Then he got rid of that and got an 88 Thunderbird. So the Fox he bought from somebody that he knew from work. The Thunderbird was right down the road for sale for $300, and it was a friend of mine from high school who had that. So 88 Thunderbird 5.0 was then my dad's daily for years. Like, I want to say like 5 years maybe he had that car as a daily. And eventually he got rid of that, and he got a 97 Ford Expedition 5.4 liter from my other friend who sold it to him for a very small amount of money. Because it needed a bunch of work too. And what else? That is pretty much it. I mean, yeah, I mean, that's all the worth mentionings right there. That's really nothing after that. At that point, that goes into the era, like the later era that we already discussed. Well, I don't know if any of that was interesting. I don't know if any of that was entertaining. I just like to talk, and I really didn't think this was going to go on this long. But that's pretty much it. If you guys like story time, if you like the millennial chair, I'm sure something else happened in my life that I could talk about. There's definitely some stories from back in the day. You know, maybe we could do some shorter videos, some shorter versions of this. And, you know, or maybe this doesn't get any views whatsoever, and I don't do it again, because that's what happened the last time I did a talk like this. But anyway, again, thank you guys for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Subscribe if you're not subscribed. Share the video with your friends. Comment down below. And, well, I think that's everything, right? But I got to cap it off by saying something I already said like 3 times. Thank you guys for watching. I will see you next time. Please tell me it's still recording. Thank God.